What my life was like before I came to the sanctuary. I had all the on-paper things that looked good. I had a job, good childhood with parents that loved me and all of that stuff, but I smoked weed every day, all day. I had pretty severe anxiety. I'd had depression since I was really, really young. Never really diagnosed because there was no overt trauma for me to have a therapy session about or anything like that, but I was just getting more and more out of control. The epitome of an overachiever. I think fast, I talk fast, I really, really cared what people thought of me, and so there was so much guilt and shame around the fact that I would spend all day, every day. I mean, I would come home from work several times a day because my schedule allowed for it, so I could go home and get high. And part of me was like, oh, I'm such a functional stoner. Look at me, I can do this, like, you know, to myself, not to other people because I was too ashamed mostly. And that was hard. It was hard to be so, like, I mean, that's what addiction is to be like, oh, I don't really want to do this, but I'm doing it anyway. But I could not cope. I just couldn't just be and live in my life, whether that was being at work or just sitting and relaxing at the end of the day or anything. I couldn't manage, I couldn't handle just being with myself because and part of it I think was because I wasn't meeting all these expectations. I see now, after being at the sanctuary, that there was so much like subtle, like codependent issues and all of these things. But I didn't know that at the time. I kind of felt like, oh, if I was to complain about how my family was, that was stupid because it was not as bad as other people's. And so to end up being like, wow, I'm a drug addict, which was not an okay thing to be in my family. Drugs were bad. We were really into the church and all of that. And I was like, I turned out to be the absolute opposite. I turned out to be everything that I was so desperately afraid of being. Things were probably the worst for me right before I came to the sanctuary. They'd been spiraling down for a long time. It was strange. I'd been so depressed for so long, and it was actually a manic episode that landed me at the sanctuary. So things were probably the worst. I'd had a lot of rock bottoms in the past and just didn't have the, I guess, the balls to ask for help, maybe, because I did need help to get here. I needed help, not just financially, but just like at this, like I couldn't book my plane ticket to get to the sanctuary. I was so dysfunctional. I couldn't even shower. I couldn't do anything. So yeah, when I got here, I was, I was pretty much a wreck. It's kind of funny to think back to that person now because it's just not me. It wasn't me ever, but clearly it was. It's, you know, we learn about shadow work, and after a certain point, if you keep suppressing all these horrible feelings, after a while they just turn around and start running your life, whether your conscious mind wants it to or not. And that was really what happened. And when I saw that that was happening and realized I'd completely lost control, and it's not like I'd had control for a while. I mean, I'd been an addict for a long time and was struggling, but I was still faking it well enough. But I wasn't even able to fake it to myself anymore. It's all the things you can't get a pill for what really is going on. Like, that's why the antidepressants and other things, they didn't work. What happened for me at the sanctuary was so many amazing things. I learned about actually being okay with owning your own personal power, which was something that in my family and in life I hadn't really been taught. It was all about sort of this external sort of like hologram of yourself, instead of like, I personally need and want these things. This is what I'm here for. I actually have the conscious mind to tap into that and know what that is, and therefore make choices from this real place, not this place of what I should be doing, this place of what the right thing is for society. But what happened here for me too was I learned that it's okay to love myself, which I was never taught. That was not an okay thing. In my Christian background, in my family background, it was always kind of frowned upon to congratulate yourself for anything. And so I kind of grew up, I guess, having this sort of mental way of being where I had thought that I was just not good enough, or that it wasn't okay. I grew up, everything that I had about my own self, like a thought that I would have or a decision that I was going to make, I would doubt it or question it. And now I realize that I don't have to do that. That's a conditioned thing that isn't me. I know what I am, and I know what I need and what I want. and I know what I'm capable of, and I'm not afraid of it anymore. And that's huge. And I know that it'll be hard to leave, but I know that I have the capability now to handle life because I can make a decision from a more empowered place. I can hold my ground a little bit more. Another thing that happened that was a very powerful thing for me was reawakening this more subtle, harder to explain spiritual side of myself that I'd always had. I'd gone back and forth in terms of what I defined it as or how I experienced it or whether I just shut it off completely because it didn't make sense in my scientific educational sphere. But to kind of have that faith in the universe, or just that feeling of support from the universe and belonging into something greater, it's so, I mean, you breathe it at the sanctuary. That's just, it's, I mean, nobody forces it down your throat or anything the way it had been, you know, sold to me in the past, and I'd taken it because I needed it. But it's just so there, you know, I feel a lot more alive, and alive not just in a me way, but in a connected to everything way. And I think that is the answer for that anxiety and depression that plagues so many of us. That is the thing that gives you the space and the capability to handle those feelings, to contain those feelings. That was another big thing for me at the sanctuary, is learning how to contain my feelings and my thoughts so I wouldn't have to escape into over-planning or overworking or addiction, which was a big one, or any of the millions of things we do. I look at addiction in a completely different way now. I'm way more addicted to my self-limiting thought patterns than I was to weed. And to see that and understand that in a way that I can actually do something about, rather than just going to therapy and talking about, well, you know, I have these subtle strange issues with my mom and therefore this is my story, the end. It's, all right, these are there and there's space around it. Let's work from that space. And to have that is, it's hard to describe. There's not really any words that describe it, but oh my God, to be able to put my feet on the ground and actually be there is such a gift. And clinically speaking, I got everything and more that I needed here in terms of dealing with my illnesses, or, you know, my depression, my anxiety, my addiction. I mean, we meet with psychologists, we meet with psychiatrists. Actually, I had a psychiatrist help me come off of my meds in a safe, great way. And I mean, a lot of people I know have side effects coming off of these things, but because of the support, the diet is a huge part. And that, I think, for my scientific mind was really, really helpful to learn about all the different ways that our food really affects how we feel, and to really kind of look at the research behind that and all of that, like from a clinical perspective, that that's going to be a really big part of my going home as a recovered, wholesome being. I learned a lot. I knew a lot about nutrition and everything before I got here, but I learned so much about, and not just like words on a paper, but actually how it feels. I mean, you can make choices, and every choice that you make, even your conversations that you have, the environment you surround yourself in, they play a part in your brain chemistry, in your whole neurological chemistry, because a lot of it's actually not in your brain. A lot of it's in your gut, which I learned. And it's very obvious how that makes a difference, to not be eating sugary food all the time. And I know some people, I mean, everybody's body is different and everybody's experience is different, and the sanctuary is really good at taking all parts of that from, I mean, I know a lot of people are on a lot of meds and need to be on a lot of meds, you know, for whatever reason, and everybody is so different, and to have a safe space to explore that, become really educated about that, to have a choice in it, to have like a part where it's not just like, take this 4 times a day, this will fix it, end of story. To really be like, okay, so let's see how like eating like this really makes a difference for you. All right, so let's talk about how well you're sleeping. Let's talk about what you did on the days that you slept well and the days that you didn't sleep well, regardless of, you know, your medicinal doses and all of that stuff. So it goes so much further beyond my clinical experience of medicine. And you know, we look at mental illness in a completely different way. You learn a lot about a lot of that, the labels and all of these things. Well-researched, scientifically backed kind of stuff, which is good for me in my head. And and to actually kind of feel like a participant rather than a recipient. It was the biggest difference that I noticed. So it's a lot more me explaining how I feel and asking questions about what I might try rather than me being like, well, I don't really know if I want to be on that, because whenever I go to the doctor, it's usually like, here, this is for you. I know you're the patient, I'm the doctor. And we set that up as a society. We set that up on the doctors and stuff, in my opinion. I work, in healthcare and know a lot of people in healthcare. So that's a big part, to be kind of empowered on my own decisions, because then it's sustainable. Then I'm not doing it for anybody else. I'm doing it because I know it's right. And that's kind of what we're all about here, is doing it not because it's the right thing by somebody's standards, but because you, in your deepest soul, working for your highest good, whatever that looks like or feels like for you, that you're in control of that. That's how you cure yourself of being addicted to things. If you're just, well, I'm going to do this because this is the thing to do, I mean, that doesn't really, it doesn't go as deep. And so the changes can't go as deep. If the remedy doesn't go as deep and you're not participating in the remedy, then the recovery doesn't take place. It doesn't really take root. You need to dig deep roots for this kind of stuff, because these are big, difficult changes. It's very difficult to overcome an addiction. Most people don't overcome them. I've changed a lot since being at the sanctuary. I'm learning how to listen, because that was actually hard for me. The biggest change, I think, is in my relationship with myself, which sounds sort of whatever, but I can sit and just be with myself and actually be okay with that. And if you'd known me before I came to the sanctuary, that would really surprise you. I think I had a lot of very subconscious and sometimes overt just self-loathing and self-defeating, self-judging behaviors. And I mean, I still have those thoughts because it's been conditioned my entire life, and yet I know them for what they are, and I know that they're not me, and I don't need to own them. They can just float away like clouds in the sky. And I mean, it's harder sometimes than not, but I know that I can. And I've changed in the way that I speak to other people. I feel that I can be a lot more truthful about how I'm really feeling or what I'm really perceiving, instead of just wanting to say what the other person wants to hear. And I've changed in terms of what's important to me. I want to freaking show up for my life now. I want to be there. I do not want to miss a moment, because there's a lot of really important stuff going on. And I felt a lot smaller before coming to the sanctuary. I felt my impact wouldn't be that big, or just that it didn't really matter either way. Like, I just wasn't important enough to myself to really make decisions that were really in my best interest, or present myself in a way that owned and defended my self-interest. And not in a selfish, egoic way, but in a like, this is really me, and this is what's really important to me, and therefore I'm gonna act like it's important to me. I think that's probably the biggest change that I've made. And I've gotten so much healthier. I feel so much better just after eating super well and moving and living in a conscious sort of environment where, I get to be reminded to be grateful and to breathe, and these things that seem so simple but have such a huge impact. I feel physically healthier, and I want to be in my life. Those are the biggest changes. I think that I would say to anybody who is thinking about coming here or wondering if it was right for them, even if this doesn't feel like the right thing for you, the fact that you're looking for something like this, do not stop looking. Do not suppress that. It's important, and it's gonna get worse before it gets better unless you're ready to make a change. And it's easier than you think, because people want to help you and people want to support you, but you gotta do it. It's so important. You cannot suppress it anymore. So just be brave and do what you gotta do. If it's not this, then keep looking for what is right for you. It's that important.